I'm making a mess. Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Devin and this is my so-called plant life. In today's video, we're going to talk about repotting plants. I'm going to give you some of my tips, not really tricks, but different soil needs and when and why you should repot your plants. So the first tip I have as to when you should repot your plants is when they're really root bound. And what I mean by root bound is that when you carefully take out your plant, sometimes you have to give it a little squeeze to jiggle it out. You can see that these roots are pretty root bound, as in they're confined to the pot, and when it's too root bound, it's not able to absorb the water because the water just passes through the roots and the roots aren't able to soak up the extra water from the soil. So another tip when repotting is to get a pot that's not that much bigger than the next one. Even though this pot is pretty root bound, I don't want to go up more than 2 inches. I usually just go about an inch bigger, you can see. Just because if you get too big of a size up from a pot, then that creates more soil and more chances for the water to sit in the soil, and it can cause root rot because soil is staying moist longer than the actual roots soaking it up. So I typically go up probably about one size up from the next pot. Like this one, I've had this one forever. All these are in their original nursery pots, that's another tip I like to do, is keep them in their nursery pots as long as possible. There are a few exceptions, which I'll talk about a little bit later on my next tip. This guy has been in his pot for a long time, probably a year, and he's growing. This is golden pothos, as you can see with the leaves. They tend to like to be a little bit more root bound, and if they're root bound, that means their leaves are probably going to get bigger because they're forcing out stronger growth. But I've noticed that it's starting to sprout smaller leaves, and I checked the roots and they were pretty root bound, and he's been in there for a while, so he needs a new refresh of soil too to get the extra nutrients that he's lost through watering. Which brings me to my next tip, is that when you're top watering, the soil gets compacted and a lot of the nutrients falls through and eventually kind of wears down over time. So giving it a new fresh soil mixture too will also give them the nutrients that they need to grow bigger, which we all want. If you tend to overwater or tend to water a lot, it's better to plant your plants in a terracotta pot, because the terracotta will pull the moisture away compared to, let's say, a ceramic pot or a plastic pot will hold in the moisture longer, which is great for your moisture loving plants, but that's for another time. So first tip is repot when it's root bound. The soil mixture that I use was a combination, excuse my big bucket, of Miracle-Gro indoor potting plant. I use like 3/4 of that with like a 1/4 of perlite, which is like the extra little white, can't see that, but the extra little white things, and then a 1/4 of orchid bark, or I started using cocoa coir too, which helps the soil be a little bit more airy and not so condensed and packed in, so it allows oxygen to flow through and allows the water to flow through to get through all the roots. So I kind of mix it up in a big bucket till I pick it up, and it's kind of just very light and airy. It tends to work best for me when I'm repotting plants. Let's repot our first one. Let's go with this peace lily. So peace lilies like soil to be partly moist, but not soggy. There's a difference between moist and soggy. Soggy soil will cause your roots to rot and will cause your plant to die. First thing I'm going to do is just kind of bottom fill a little bit. I just do 2 scoops like this, as you can see. And this is actually a ceramic pot, which is okay for peace lilies, like I said, because They do tend to like to stay on the more moist side. I don't want to put it in a terracotta pot and then have to water it every 2 days because they do require quite a bit of watering needs when it comes to that. So I'm going to measure a little bit, and you want, I'll put a little bit too much on the bottom, but you want your plant to sit right on the top, not over and not too far under, because we're going to backfill the soil around it, and you don't want to cover up the top of it, and you don't want it to not have enough soil that it's top heavy. So another tip, you can kind of massage the roots a little bit, break it up a little bit, give it a little bit of, I'm doing this very gently, I'm not ripping it apart, but just kind of squeezing it and kind of loosening up some of that soil that's been sitting on the bottom for a long time. And I'm going to dig a little hole and make sure she's sitting right, and then just fill it in with dirt. I don't like to compact my soil too much around the plants, just because you still want them to breathe, but you don't want too much air. I'll show you in a second. Towards the end, I do kind of press it down just a little to make sure the plant's secure. It's easy as that. She's in a new pot, and hopefully I won't have to water her as much, and she can grow bigger. All right, let's do the next one. I'm just loosening up the roots again, putting her in, and then we're just going to backfill. People ask if, like, how soon should I repot my plants once I get them from the store, and I've learned over the years of trial and error and research and listening to other plant experts that I used to repot it like the second I got home from the box store, because it's more exciting to put them in a pot like this compared to a pot like this, but you could always put it in a cover pot. But I tend to wait. You know, it needs time. It's like when you move into a new house, it needs time to acclimate to the environment, to the new lighting, because it is coming from a greenhouse, most likely, where it has like the optimal light and temperature, and there is going to be an adjustment period to it. This one I got from, this is a alocasia. I got this from an Etsy site from a nursery. So I had it sitting in like this, like I just talked about, a cover pot, and it's nursery pot. Stick it in. I've been noticing the type of soil is drying out really quickly, and it needs a soil refresh, basically. So this one is not super root bound, but like I said before, sometimes the soil just needs a little bit more nutrients to it. It's gonna help it grow. So that's what I'm gonna do. And so this pot is not much bigger than this one. You can see it's basically the same size. Since it's not root bound, I don't want to put it in a big pot, and like I said before, it will suffer. So I just grabbed a tiny, like, size bigger, which still fits in a pot, which is the look that I want. So I'm just gonna loosen some of the soil. It's a good time to check out your roots too. Like, your roots should be white, you know, healthy. And if you see any bad roots, just go ahead and trim them off. And sometimes you will find that some plants' roots are a little bit darker than others. As long as they're not black and mushy, that means they've rotted out. Some of them, you know, are a little bit darker. So don't freak out if you're like, my roots aren't white. It's pretty easy to repot plants. It's, you know, it's easy to do, fun to do. I feel like brought my plants to the salon and they got a fresh new dew, and, you know, they got a clean diet now. I don't know. Yeah, just tap it down a little bit. So now it's proportional, so it's not a huge pot compared to the plant size. Stick her back in, and can't even tell the difference, but she has more nutrients. So I just got this one in the mail a couple days ago, and the plant's in good shape, but the roots are going like crazy out the bottom, and the soil was just tipped out. Very sandy soil. So I'm actually just gonna take an old nursery pot, it's about a size bigger, and just stick it in that one. I do repot a lot of times in nursery pots if I don't have a pot to fill it in, which is totally okay. Chuck it on in there. And this has a lot of new shoots coming up, so that's a good sign. Trying to be as gentle as possible to get this out because the roots are everywhere. And the soil is just like, falling off of it. Oh, look at that. It's just like one giant root. I'm gonna carefully put him back in there. It's kind of funky because he's like lopsided to one side. So a lot of it is just trial and error. Whoop. And eyeballing it. Don't stress out too much about it. Your plants will adjust. They'll appreciate the new soil, appreciate the new home. And if you repot your plants differently than I do or have any suggestions, comment down below and let me know. I'd love to hear how you repot. You know, what are some of your tips and tricks? Because there is no like hard and fast rule of repotting plants. Like I said, I'm not an expert by any means. I've just kind of learned over the past few years of what's worked and kind of understanding how plants grow and what their needs are. And this is sitting kind of low, but I will tamp this one down just a tad, just because it was there had no soil left on it. I don't know if you can hear them, but I think the mailman's here. It's kind of sitting lower in the pot than I had wanted it to. Might put some more soil in there. All right, just filling it in a little bit more because I was seeing the roots. So that's filled up a little bit more. And living a happier life. I'm making a mess. This is kind of like an exception to the rule. I just got her the other day. Her roots are a little coming out the bottom and not really in her. She doesn't fit in the pot. So what I'm actually gonna do is just take her out and put her directly in another pot. She's got healthy roots. I'm just gonna stick her in here. You know, it's the same size as her nursery pot. She seems to be liking the soil that she's in. You know, minimal stress to her. Now she's in a prettier pot. So yeah, that's all my tips that I have for repotting. Pretty straightforward. You know, keep in mind of repotting when they're root bound, damaged, sitting in soggy soil from wherever you got it from, replenishing. Don't go up too big of a size for a pot. Typically I just go one size up. Make sure the soil, like the roots aren't active down there, they're healthy roots. Other than that, if you have any tips that I haven't covered or comment suggestions, leave them down below. I'll link everything that I've used today for soil mixture down in the description below of kind of the ratio that I use. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you're staying safe and this gives you something to do while you're inside. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.